Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Ain't That Something? And I am here today with a special guest, chatting with us all the way from New York City. I want to give a very warm welcome to Dr. Ashley Rodriguez. She is here with us today to provide some insight, and I'll let her go ahead and introduce herself and what it is that she does.
So much for having me. My name is Ashley. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I also have a certification in perinatal mental health, which basically just means I provide emotional support for all the beautiful and difficult things that come up in pregnancy and postpartum. Happy
Oh,
to be here.
thank you so much. Dr. Rodriguez reached out to me after listening to one of the podcasts that I did in the series, um, that was titled Dear Mama, let's talk, like, let's be real. And she reached out to me because in that episode, if you hadn't had a chance to listen to it, I discussed just how like generational patterns and traumas pass on to sometimes the kids, and how we can try and alleviate that, create a new path, and try to live more healthy emotional lives, especially if we become parents ourselves. And so I wanted to continue the discussion, and Dr. Rodriguez wanted to continue the conversation with me as well. And she let me know that she has some tools and some things that she provides to people who are in that space that want to make a change and that, don't know where to begin. And so she shared with me the roots to resilience. It's a type of survey questionnaire where you can measure and determine, like, are there these areas in your life that are more prominent or you're dealing with, and it gives you kind of a guide as far as like, where do I go? Like, okay, I know I grew up with a lot of things, but I don't know how to start working on that. And so I'll let Dr. Rodriguez speak to that a little bit, and then I have some questions for her, and we can just kind of talk about how it all ties in and just helping people with a way to create new patterns and new ways to love and um, ensure that their children continue this on in a positive way.
So, the Roots to Resilience Toolkit was born out of my experience working with one women that were afraid to have children because of their own childhood trauma histories and not wanting to pass that down. But then on the other side, I work with a lot of parents that want to parent intentionally, want to make sure they aren't repeating cycles of trauma. And I was thinking, what are the things that people need? It's very beginner friendly. So, like you said, it starts with an inventory and you go down different areas that would impact your childhood and your upbringing. And then I go into what are the basic tools that you need to get started on breaking cycles of trauma. The
That
idea is that as a licensed psychologist, I can only work with people in New York. So I wanted to give something to people that, regardless of where you live, you can get started on this work.
That's incredible. That's awesome. And I'm so happy that you reached out to me in this way. I'm also in mental health, as well. I'm a counselor and a professional mental health like specialist. So I understand the process, and that's why I really appreciated your inventory. So, couple of questions in the survey. You allow that, like you said, it's beginner friendly. And I want to, just know, like, for our listeners who are new to this type of work, how would you describe generational trauma? And what would that look like in everyday terms? Because I know sometimes these buzzwords come and these terms, but like people don't really get it. They may have an idea. How would you describe that?
I think, in the most basic form, generational trauma is the passing down of pain and survival strategies from one generation to the next. And the tricky part about it is that at some point it was helpful for our ancestors. It helps them survive the really horrible things that they experienced. And at the point where we are now, it might be hindering you, it might be keeping you small. I see a lot of, especially women of color, a lot of women of color having trouble taking up space, taking up um, or using their voice. That comes from generational trauma. Hiding, in a lot of ways, was a way that people stayed safe in times of slavery, colonization, and all of the horrible things our ancestors went through. So, those are some of the really small ways that it might show up now that sometimes in therapy we forget to think through the history and where's the root to some of these behaviors.
Yeah. Wow, that's really good. And like even in my own personal reflection of it, I didn't really find my voice to speak on things that made me feel uncomfortable or that I didn't agree with until I was almost 30. It was like I had went so long just keeping it, holding it in, and then later like having so much heaviness and weight on me because I really didn't like that, or somebody made a suggestion, or they just told me what to do. And so it's very liberating when you are able to discover that and discover your voice and take back that feeling that like you're powerless, right? So that's awesome. I love that. Um, Also in your, because some of the questions that I had prepared, we're kind of going through it, so I'm gonna just kind of skip around. But there was some parts in the survey that talked about like family messaging and cultural beliefs. How do you feel that these old cultural or family messages shape how we deal with conflict, emotion, and relationships?
Think going back to what I was saying earlier, in that in some ways it was adaptive at some point. A lot of the messaging, a lot of the values that our cultures have are to put family first, are to not share, the drama with other people. And in some ways, back then, staying together was a way to make sure that everybody was okay. And the tricky part is that anything at an extreme can be uh, it can make it hard, right? And so the idea is that we want to find a balance for ourselves. So even if family is important to you, like family is very important to me as a Latina, that's a value that was passed down to me. How can I balance it with, and there's some things that need to be pulled out,
Mhm.
and there's some things that need to be changed.
Mhm.
So thinking through some of those ideas or those messages that we were given from young, right? Like to not trust others, or that you have to work twice as harder than others. In a lot of ways, there might be some truth to it too.
Mhm.
And I don't want to dispute that it's completely inaccurate. It's just, how is it helping you now? And
Mhm.
how can we reframe it to something that is more helpful?
Yeah. I had a situation, and I like this because it's like, again, I can relate to a lot of it because the upbringing that I had, I internalize like I need to work as hard as I can. I don't want to live like we did. I want a different type of life. And I think at a certain point in my life, I had reached a place of, like I got there. I reached the top, but I didn't know how to just like relax there. It was still like, oh, I got to keep going. And of course, we want to continue to have goals and we want to continue to achieve things. But like you said, there's got to be a balance because you can, in a way, sabotage what is already there. And you're missing the blessing of it all because you have overcame and you have like discovered how to, but because if you haven't done that work or really realized it, you still feel like I gotta keep going. I gotta, and you become blind to the success that you have, right? I had another podcast about women who are not realizing that the way that they're working and going for goals is a type of like hidden depression, right? Like they are just going, 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 and they never see that like you're good. You're good. You made it there, right? So that's awesome. Okay. I love this next part. It was about setting boundaries and again, using that voice and breaking the silence. So, what do you say to people who feel guilty or afraid to set limits with people who raised them?
So challenging.
Mm,
So one, I normalize it, I validate it, it makes sense that it's hard. And I think about especially having adult relationships with the people that cared for us and the people that are important to us. We need to take up space in that relationship.
mhm,
And so if something is difficult for you, bothering you, when we don't speak up, some of the things that sometimes happens is that then we start building up resentment,
mm,
or sometimes we're maybe a little passive aggressive, right? And we just bottle it all in, and eventually everybody has a limit, and how people maybe have their outbursts may look different. So my challenge to people is, what would it be like to have a little more space in that relationship and say, you know, when you did X, Y, and Z, I felt this, insert feeling here,
mm,
and give an alternative. Next time I would appreciate if whatever the alternative may be. And what I like to tell people with boundaries is that people are likely going to have a reaction to it. That doesn't mean that you're wrong,
yeah,
just means that they have their feelings, and that's okay. They're allowed to have their feelings, just like we're allowed to have our feelings, but that doesn't negate the fact that you need to assert yourself in that way. So making sure we aren't making ourselves responsible for someone's reaction to our boundaries, and also practicing self-validation.
yeah,
You felt that way for a reason.
yeah. That is so good. And it's so important. And I feel like that was kind of part of my journey of finding that voice, of letting that person know, like, I don't, I didn't appreciate that you did this to me, or I didn't appreciate that, like, every time we get around family, you bring up this story that wasn't true from when we were kids, and you're still like carrying it on and carrying it on when that, that was not the truth that happened. Just little things like that that weigh on you. And so when you're able to voice that, that other person can like reflect on themselves and be like, oh, okay, maybe I need to chill out, So that's, yep, good stuff. Um, the next part, it kind of goes into that it ties into that because it discusses like when you're trying to deal and heal coexisting when it comes to things that might be messy or those family dynamic changes. So I think that co that kind of goes hand in hand with that. And then you also discussed about celebrating the progress. Like nothing happens overnight, nothing happens in a week, a month, even a year. But it's those little bitty pieces that are happening that you're able to take note of that show that you are breaking those cycles. So, what does that look like to celebrate progress?
I think it's so important because sometimes we think healing is linear, and it's not. There are going to be times where maybe you didn't assert yourself in the way that you wanted and you might regret it. And that doesn't take away from all the work that you've done before. It just means in that interaction, maybe you didn't feel comfortable for whatever reason it is. So I believe in the power of rituals, and I love to practice gratitude. So every day, every night rather, I write down the things that I did that were important that day. And it's not always productivity. It might be like a conversation that I had with someone that I really felt connected to them. I felt supported by this person, whatever it may be. And in those moments, those are the things that I'm proud of. That is the progress, right? Of making sure that I'm taking action that's aligned with my values.
Mhm.
And by doing that, I can look back and I can see all of the different times that I did that. Instead of looking for these really big accomplishments, sort of like what you were saying earlier, we're always looking for the next thing. And that, in some ways, is driven by society. Like you're supposed to look for the next big thing, the next big milestone. But Instead, I think it's really about the small moments, the small interactions that say a lot more about where you're going and what's important to you.
I agree with that. I think it's part of a discussion that is not necessarily given all the time. And because society has such an influence and impact on like everything when it comes to raising children, being a single mom, or being a single woman who hasn't been married or has kids, or just all these different categories that have its own levels of pressure. I feel like when it comes to it all, we as people have to have kind of understanding. Like some of that is superficial and some of it is just like unrealistic, you know. We want to be successful, but we have to think about like the long term. Like when I get older and I'm not able to like go and bust and grind, can I literally just sit there in my rocking chair and just take it in and be, happy where I'm at? So that's so powerful. Um, I also wanted to um get your, if you're on social media, if you're on any type of um networks that people can connect with you. I also want to see if I can get your permission to share your toolkit to my listeners, because I think it's a good little like start for people that are looking for something to get them going, right?
Yeah,
And I would love to continue like collaborating and, having you
absolutely.
as a guest, because I think you provide an insight that's, touching on so many different areas emotionally that a lot of women of color don't do. We have like such a thick skin and like a strong mindset a lot of times that we forget about. We have to do that inner work in order to stay strong, but not break us down.
Yeah, and I think we're taught to take care of everyone.
Oh,
We're put
yes,
in that role.
absolutely. I mean, you can just think about like birth orders. I have like a one friend who she's in a family dynamic where they have multiple siblings, and sometimes she's the one that's carrying the weight, but she's like the younger one, right? And there's all these different things that's happening, and she's kind of going in there and stepping up and helping. But at the same time, it's like, sometimes people got to figure it out on their own, and we can't be the fixer for everybody, right? I
Mm.
myself was in that space at one time where I had to realize, like, I can't fix it all. Like, I have to, if I were to jump off a ship or anything, or even, we know the analogy, if the plane is crashing, like, you have to put that oxygen mask on yourself. Like, you have to look out for yourself, and you can't overextend trying to help everyone. But if we've grown up in environments, like you said, to survive, you were in survival mode back then, right? But sometimes it's hard to get out of that, and you're still on that energy, you're still on that drive, and it affects other things, your relationships, your work, your stress for yourself, all of it. So,
Right. And, I think what I try to remind women that struggle with putting themselves first, and it's because it's not natural. It's not natural for us to put ourselves first. Is
yeah,
that by doing it, you also model it for others.
yeah,
So with my family, I am the one that often fixes. I'm the youngest, but my siblings joke I'm the older younger sibling because I'm the one that usually gets in and what's going on, what do you need? And it's part of why I became a psychologist, right? Like if you think
yeah.
about why we go into the fields that we do. And so now, sometimes I'll call my mom and my sister and like when I'm like, okay, I'm at capacity, I've had enough, I gotta go. At first, my mom would be like, "You really don't have to say it that way." Like,
Hmm.
but I gotta go. I've had enough.
Yeah.
And now my sister says it. And now sometimes my mom says it. And it's like, we don't always have to make an excuse. We can just straightforwardly say, and it's time to wrap up this conversation, you know? It's okay. So in some ways, I've modeled that. They didn't like it at first.
Oh no. Yeah, because they feel like they're cut off. Like, what? What you mean?
I'm
Yeah.
like, excuse me? But now they feel they have permission, not that they needed it,
Yeah.
but by me doing it, now they feel comfortable doing it. So sometimes by you putting yourself first, you're teaching people around you how to also do that. And you see that ripple effect, which is really nice.
Yes, that is so true. I think I tend to see it with the people I work with and some of my friends. You don't realize how people are looking up to you, or you're inspiring someone and you're like, little old me, I
Mhm.
over here just trying to hold on. But at the same time, the way you carry yourself, I was recently with family and some friends, and I had a roommate because we went on like a little trip and stuff. And one of the roommates, we knew each other, but we didn't know each other that well. But we just got into these really good conversations, and she would share with me, like, I'm just kind of really direct, and I just say what's on my mind, but I feel like it backfires a lot of times and things like that. And I was like, sometimes when you're in that situation and someone says something and you want to just like fire off with a dart to like, it's okay to pause. It's okay to pause and think about like what I'm about to say. How is it going to affect that person? How is it going to affect me after I say it? And I can say it softer, but still get the same point across. She's like, okay, I can think about that. And so it makes me feel good. It's rewarding when you do know that people are looking up to you. So it does, I think, inspire me to continue to grow and try to be a person that can provide that type of insight and just, like I'm still living, I'm still learning, but at the same time, you understand you this role has been bestowed upon you, and like how do you create this balance of like, I'm not going to overwhelm myself, like you said, I'm going to wrap up something that's like too negative, or we're just kind of going in a circle, we're not getting anywhere with this convo. Thank you, but I'm gonna go ahead, I gotta go cut up some dishes cut up some dishes, I gotta cut some food or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Mhm.
that's so good. Do
You
you
never know who's watching.
that part, and I feel like for me, like I've always been a kind of even-tempered person, right? But I do remember a time where if I said something, it would really impact. It didn't have to be like I cursed you out, but it would impact that person. And I kind of worked on that because I didn't want to be so negative when I spoke to people. And then at the same time, like, I don't want anybody to have that view of me that like she doesn't compose herself, she doesn't, and I think I've worked to the point of being one of my strengths is like in a time of chaos, in a time where people are hostile or like really heated, I just become the calm for them. And they could be yelling and screaming at me, and I'm like, I understand how you feel, right? But let's take a couple of deep breaths. Let me get you calm first so that I can hear you and do the best that I can to help you out, right? And so that's one of my like superpowers, because I have worked in environments where I've had people just like on 10, and somehow I'm just like, calm down. Bring it back here, right? And no matter what the situation is, that's kind of my go-to. Like, I'm going to stay calm. I'm not going to get emotional about it. If I am starting to feel like they're trying to trigger me or saying something, because people will do that. They will try to push you out of that. Like, oh, okay, there's no way you're this calm. There's no way that, you know what? I don't think this is the right time to talk. We can put this on the shelf. You can come back and talk to me in an hour or maybe tomorrow. But right now, we need to end this conversation and be done, right? That's it. You're not taking it personal because once that person gets there, now you're left to be able to say something that you may regret, or someone else may, that messes up your reputation of like people have been looking at you at a certain way, and now you're out of your character. Never let anyone take you out of your character. That's the key.
Right. And there's a level of self-awareness in that. And that one, your superpower is co-regulation. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But also in that awareness, you know when this is too much for me. I have to exit stage left. And I think that goes to knowing your window of tolerance,
Yeah.
right? Like what is okay for me. And then either I'm getting ready to hurt somebody's feelings or whatever it may be, or shut down. Some people do the opposite and shut down in those situations. So you have to know the tools that work for you depending on how um, angry you are. I tell clients all the time something that's going to work for you when you're maybe a 4 triggered, it's not going to work for you when you're a level 8 trigger. And that's okay. And that's the power of having different tools in your toolkit.
Yeah, yeah. And it all ties back to understanding what those traumas were when you were growing up. Because I have recognized more so now when my childhood self dealt with something, like I get extra stubborn, and it's because when I was a kid, this is what was going on and I couldn't voice myself, and I felt it just balling up, and I was kind of frustrated and didn't know how to express it. And so if I get to that trigger 8, I'm like, it's trying to pull out that. But when you use tools like what you have, it brings that self-awareness to you that like no one else can find that. It's a self-searching to better understand you, to allow you to, interact with others at the workplace, at home, in relationships. All of it ties together, and it's so, so important. And when we find the root, then we can build the resilience. It's so beautiful. Like it's awesome. It's awesome. So, go ahead and share where we can find you on social medias and different platforms. And, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. This is
Hey, the easiest way to keep up with my work is on Instagram. So my Instagram handle is Path Break Coaching and Consulting. And in my link in bio, you'll have the link to my website and all of my offerings. So the Roots to Resilience is one of my paid offerings. It's $11. What I can do for your audience is make a 10% coupon. So what I'll do is I'll put ATS 10 for
Mhm.
10% off for any of my workbooks. Roots to Resilience is just one of them. But I also have workbooks on inner child healing, on self-love, rebuilding healthy relationships, so on and so forth. Um, yeah, so that's where you can find me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. So, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to more discussion on this, and just discovering and exploring more areas of conversation that aren't had. And that's what Ain't That Something is about, because when you realize, you're like, dang, all of this is kind of tied together, right? And we can get to a path and get to a lifestyle that incorporates it where it's just natural for us. So, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you again, Dr. Rodriguez, for being on the show and giving us your insight and carrying on this discussion. Until next time, guys, we're going to be resilient. We're going to get to those roots of things, and I'll talk to you guys again. Bye.